Thank you so much, everyone, for having us today, members of the LACERA team, everyone who's kind of supported us throughout this process as we dive into the economic, fiscal, and social impacts of LACERA pensioners. My name is Mazen Bouzaneddine. I'm the manager for impact analysis at Beacon Economics, and I'm joined by my colleagues, Sam and Jonathan. Clicker. Oh, can you click? Okay. What's that? Say next slide. Yeah. So to start off with, I just wanted to talk briefly a little bit about the purpose of the study and why this is really beneficial for all the stakeholders involved. As a trend, historically defined benefits, can we please go back to the previous slide? As a trend historically, defined benefits have been shown to bring in higher than average rates of returns for pensioners and really being beneficial for all the stakeholders involved, whether it's taxpayers, employers, and employees. Due to the nature of the structure of defined benefits plans, as a result of pooling in large numbers of investors and retirees, there is lower costs on the employee, as well as mitigating a lot of the risk that comes with other various retirement plans, such as defined contribution benefits. So why is it important to conduct an impact analysis? Well, an impact analysis is designed to show what the impacts are beyond what the direct spending of a pensioner might be. Assessing pensions and retirees has become common practice. So, for example, in California, we see that with CalPERS, but also on a national level, we see that with studies done by Pensionomics and the National Institute on Retirement Securities. Our goal here is we see a shift in demographics, and that's been going on for quite a few years as an aging population. So we really want to highlight what the benefits are of a defined benefit pensions in terms of offering a constant stream of revenue to the economy, and how that's going to become even more important down the line. Next slide, please. Yep.
You said that on the first slide, you implied that defined contribution plans are not professionally managed. And I just want to clarify, in Los Angeles County, defined contribution plans are professionally managed.
I think that was more so broadly also like with regards to other forms of retirement plans. So for example, like IRAs and stuff like that. And it's not specifically just for defined contributions plans and in a public setting as well. We're talking more broadly, just comparatively to other retirement plans in general.
Can Mr. Kelly repeat the question, because we cannot hear you? And also, if you need to say, ask a question, please raise your hand accordingly. Mr. Kelly, can you repeat the question?
I apologize. My comment was that
I can't hear him.
Joe, you need to turn on your mic. It's red. You have to touch the little red.
His mic is on. We're working on it. So 1 second.
Oh,
His
okay.
mic is on. Sorry.
Someone forget to feed the gremlins last night?
Go ahead.
Thank you, Linda. My comment was that on the first slide, it said, it made a reference to the fact that defined contribution plans are not professionally managed. And my comment was in Los Angeles County, the defined contribution plans are professionally managed, and they're under the jurisdiction of a plan administrative committee on which the current treasurer tax collector sits. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You can proceed with the presentation, please.
Thank you. With this slide, I really want to touch base here about the lens that the Beacon team took in order to conduct this analysis. We'll split it into two parts, a quantitative assessment and a qualitative assessment. When it comes to the quantitative assessment, first and foremost, we wanted to do a deep dive onto where the spending is going to go from the pensioners and assessing the amount of money that's going to be disaggregated by region. And then we're going to aggregate that into what we call a total direct spending by expenditure type, so by industry. And then finally, we construct a multi-regional input-output analysis of LACERA pensioners, where we examine where the ripple effects of these of the expenditures by the pensioners are impacting and benefiting the various industries in and around Los Angeles County and California overall. When it comes to the qualitative assessment, we're more so taking a deep dive into the background and portfolio on the LACERA pensioners, examining age demographics, racial and ethnic composition. Further along, we're looking at comparing salary metrics to countywide averages, healthcare costs, and other variables where we compare based on the geography of where the pensioners reside, which is in this case, Los Angeles County. And then finally, we're assessing a total social and community impacts, which is non-quantitative in nature, derived by LACERA pensioners to the communities in which they respectively reside. Next slide, please. So to start off with, just giving a little bit of a background about the importance of such studies, is nationwide, not just in LA, not just in California, we're faced with an aging population. The average age for the past few years has been going up. And as we can see from the charts here, the age groups, specifically 65 and older, have been increasing. When we examine, for example, younger age working groups, so starting at, for example, 25 up until 64, these age groups between 2011 and 2021 in Los Angeles County have been relatively unchanged. What we do see a drastic change is in the age group of under 25, dropping from roughly 3.5 million individuals in 2011 to just under 3 million in 2021. And comparatively, we see a 31% increase in populations aged 65 and older. To be more specific, in 2011, roughly 1.07 million individuals in LA County were age 65 and older. Now that's closer to 1.5 million. And if we look at the graph on the right, where it's on a statewide level here, this shows a forecast trend of population for individuals age 65 and older. If we start from the actuals, which was estimated to be in 2010, $4.3 million, 4.3 million people, that comprised roughly 11.5% of the population. So approximately roughly one in 10 people were age 65 and older. As the time goes by, that number is going to increase, and the share of individuals age 65 and over is going to increase as well. So comparatively, if we look at 2050, for example, 40 years down the line from 2010, we're going to have an estimated 11.3 million people age 65 and over, comprising 26% of the population. So almost 1 in 4 people are estimated to be age 65 and over by 2050. And that just highlights, when we think of this economically, the share of consumer spending is going to have a greater reliance on individuals age 65 and over as time goes by. So that's why these kinds of analyses are super important, so we can touch upon where these benefits and where these impacts are occurring. Next slide, please. Before we dive into the specific data and the economic impacts, I just want to briefly go over some of the methodology and specifically the key terms that we're going to be hearing throughout this presentation. To start with, direct impact, that's the economic activity that's generated directly through LACERA pensioner spending. So for example, a pensioner receives their paycheck after savings, after taxes, they go out and they go to a restaurant. That check where they spend at the restaurant is going to be considered a direct spend. Subsequently, there's what's called an indirect impact, that's also known as supply chain impact or business to business transactions. That's the economic activity that's generated via the supply chain. So let's think back to our restaurant example. Once that pensioner pays that check, that restaurant is going to take a portion of that money and it's going to restock on goods that it needs. It's going to go to wholesale, it's going to go to retail, it's going to go to various goods distributors and vendors and restock on the goods that it needs. That additional economic impact is captured under the indirect impact here. And finally, with regards to the economic impacts, we have the induced impact. That's the economic activity that's generated through the workers. So if we think back to our pensioner going to the restaurant example, the workers that are working at the restaurant and the subsequent supply chain firms that are benefiting from that transaction, whether it's the wholesale, whether it's the retail, whether it's the vendor, all those workers are going to be benefiting from that initial spending that the pensioner spent on. And they're going to take that money home and they're going to spend it on goods and services and rent and healthcare, et cetera. All that worker spending or household spending is going to be captured under the induced impact. And then, oh, sorry, I just had one more. And then finally, we have the social impact, which is the community and social benefits of LACERA pensioners. That's aside from the economic and fiscal, that's more qualitative. So for example, a LACERA pensioner going out and volunteering in their local community, that's what we highlight there. Talking about the benefits of a the defined benefits plan, constantly providing revenue streams during even an economic downturn. Those are community benefits. So that's what we highlight in this section. Next slide, please. So here we have a breakdown of LACERA pensioners by region. So to start with, nationwide, there's just under 73,400 pensioners in the United States. The overwhelming majority of them, about 82%, reside in California. So that's just over 60,500 people. And in that, the majority of those reside in Los Angeles County. So 42,308 pensioners in Los Angeles County, more than half, almost 60% of the nationwide pensioners. The remaining reside in various different counties around SoCal and other places throughout California. But I want to highlight this because the focus of our study specifically here is examining what these 42,300 pensioners residing in Los Angeles County provide for the local and broader community. So that's the source of spending that we're examining here as the driver to build our model to estimate where the ripple effects are going and which industries are going to be benefiting. Next slide, please. So in this slide, we have a breakdown of where the pensioners reside by supervisorial district, as well as the amount of pensions that's paid out to those respective regions. The largest by far is reside in District 5. That's just under 10,500 pensioners. And unsurprisingly, that they also share the largest amount of pension amount paid annually. That's just under 625 million, or 26.5% of the total pensions paid throughout Los Angeles County annually. This is followed by District 4 with just over 9,200 pensioners, or about 22%. And then lastly, District 1 with 9,160 pensioners, approximately, or 22%. District 3 comprises the lowest amount of pensioners residing in any supervisorial district. That's about 4,250, or roughly 10%. And the total pensions amount paid there is just over $250 million. But as we'll see in the next few slides, the contributions that District 3 has just due to the supply chain and business transaction is pretty significant as well. Next slide, please. So what are the actual impacts? Where do the ripple effects goes, and what's actually happening with regards to this direct spending? So just right off the bat.
Let me stop you here 1 second. Mr. Knox.
Yes, thank you, Chair Santos. Just quickly, and it's not a huge issue, obviously. On the last slide, that was interesting. I've never seen it broken down by supervisorial district before. Just curious if the timing of that, was that before they redrew the district boundaries, or is that with the current updated boundaries?
This is, I believe, as of May 2022. So this is after, I assume, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. So here we have the economic impacts that are generated by the LA-based LACERA pensioners throughout Los Angeles County. Right off the bat, just the direct spending. So the pensioners taking their money after savings, after the tax rates, and going to spend in the local economy is generating $1.9 billion annually throughout Los Angeles, California, and quite substantially supporting over 20,100 jobs in a variety of industries. Not only that, it's pretty significant also the secondary impacts, or the impacts that are created through the indirect and induced impacts as well. Specifically with indirect impacts, as a reminder, that's the supply chain and business to business transactions. We see just under 3,100 jobs supported annually just through businesses engaging in transactions with other firms and establishments. And as a result, generating just shy of $730 million annually in economic impact. In fact, when we take into account both indirect and induced, it accounts for 30% of the total of economic impact that's derived as a result of spending done by LACERA pensioners in Los Angeles County. So what does that mean when we break it down by district? There are some mirroring of what we saw in the previous slide. So the largest impacts does occur in District 5 at $606 million generated annually in economic output. That's followed by District 1 with just shy of $587 million and District 4 at 530. But if we take a look at District 3 here, it's pretty interesting because of the concentration of businesses there. Despite the fact that district only roughly $250 million was allocated in pensions annually, it still generates almost twice as much as the money that's provided there. So almost $436 million being generated in District 3. And that's just an indication of how complex the Los Angeles economy really is. You know, you might reside in one certain supervisorial district, but for leisure and hospitality, you might go to another one. And so the way the supply chains interact with each other is in a similar manner as well. One might be in District 1, one might be in District 5. So there's complex intricacies when it comes to calculating these total output. But despite the fact that District 3 had roughly $250 million in direct spending, the total amount is almost $500 million. Next slide, please. All right, thank you. So where is this broken down when we examined it under the hood in terms of industries? And we aggregated these 4 super sectors to kind of give an understanding of where this money is going. And this is the direct impact. So this is the money once pensioners receive their check, where are they spending this money at? And overwhelmingly, most of the money is going to housing and real estate. That's the largest beneficiary of the direct spending at $713 million. And that includes both renters and owner-occupied dwellings. This is followed by finance, banking, and insurance. And this includes a smattering of subsectors from investment activities to insurance agencies, monetary authorities, et cetera. And that's generating roughly $317 million in economic output annually. The last 2, retail, leisure, and hospitality, unsurprisingly, also one of the top industries where pensioners spend their money. Retail specifically, this can go from building materials to clothing stores to food and beverage. We're seeing $105 million injected into the economy in Los Angeles just from LACERA pensioners residing in LA. And then lastly, leisure and hospitality. This includes restaurants, food and drinking places, any entertainment services, et cetera. That's just shy of $100 million. And really, this last industry, leisure and hospitality, is quite interesting because, as we all know, defined benefit plans, it provides a constant fixed stream of income when someone retires. And that's even in economic downturns. So usually leisure and hospitality industries are the most vulnerable when it comes to economic downturns. You know, people save more, they're less likely to go out and eat, but a household that's receiving a constant fixed stream of income is still likely to in some way, maybe less than what normal is, but it's still likely to go and support these industries one way or another. So there really is an added benefit from defined benefit plans towards that end. And in total, these 4 super sectors combined, they generate $1.2 billion in the Los Angeles economy annually, or over 63% of the total direct economic output. And here we move on to the secondary impacts, again, with the same 4 sectors, but we see the amount of impact generated shifts a little bit. And that's not really that surprising. When we think of housing and real estate from a secondary impact standpoint, that's from supply chain and induced. Most of that money is coming from the induced impacts. That's because workers who work in various different establishments that are supported by LACERA pensioners spending their money, they're going to take a portion of that money and they're going to pay it on their rents or mortgages, et cetera. So that amounts to roughly $86 million annually. That also includes establishments paying commercial leases, for example. The largest impact actually also occurs in finance, banking, and insurance. And when we think back to the last 2 slides where we said there's 23,600 employees that are supported annually by LACERA pensioners' spending. This really isn't all that surprising, considering that a lot of those employees are going to need to have their insurance paid for by the businesses. There's going to be investment activity from those employees themselves, professional service firms like accounting firms that rely on these establishments that are supported by LACERA pensioners. So as a result, all these forms of spending is going to generate roughly $358 million only through secondary impacts. The last 2 are retail and leisure and hospitality. Again, these are mainly driven by the worker and household spendings, aka the induced impacts. For retail, that's roughly $12.5 million annually. For leisure and hospitality, that's almost $21 million annually. So combine these four super sectors just solely from secondary impacts from indirect and induced, they almost generate $500 million annually throughout Los Angeles County, or accounting roughly 59% of the total secondary output generated. So we've talked in depth about the impacts here locally in Los Angeles County, but I want to mirror that to what the statewide impacts are. From a job standpoint, almost 25,000 jobs are supported statewide as a result of LACERA pensioners spending their money. In terms of direct impact, that's going to stay the same because Los Angeles County's economy is so big. It's just likely that all the pensioners are going to directly spend their money within the county. It's unlikely that someone who lives in central LA is going to go to Orange County for groceries, shopping, everything. All the establishments you need are likely to be in the county itself. But where it does differ is in the secondary impacts, for example, indirect and induced. So business to business transactions are more likely to occur at a macro level than just simply in LA County. So for example, the Inland Empire is a huge hub of logistics. So if we go back to the restaurant example, it's likely that a lot of goods and goods is transported from the Inland Empire with establishments that engage with those firms. So that's going to be captured here under the indirect. So in total, almost $1.1 billion is generated statewide through secondary impacts alone. So due to limited supply chain availabilities here, we see that California's impacts are 21% greater than LA County's from an indirect impact standpoint, and induced impacts just because of LA County drawing so many commuters for it, from so many neighboring counties, induced impacts are almost twice as high. But even nonetheless, keeping that in mind, LA County still absorbs over 90% of the total statewide economic output just because of the size and magnitude of the economy of Los Angeles. Next slide, please. So we've talked in depth about the economic impacts. I want to turn it over just a little bit for the fiscal impacts now. Annually, state and local government tax revenues generated from LACERA pensioners is over $150 million. And this is where it gets pretty significant for these local communities as well, because if we take a look, the largest sources of revenue are in sales tax and property tax. And now a lot of that does go to the state and then is reinvested and is distributed all over, but a lot of these funds are going to come back to help support local social programs, education, criminal justice, infrastructure, etc. So these are funds that are being generated for local government agencies that are extremely beneficial to the local community overall. On a federal level, we see over $185 million generated in total tax revenue. The largest sources coming from income tax and social insurance, which is unsurprising just given the total amount of employment supported, and as a result, just from the wages, the total amount of income tax that's going to be generated. If we, sorry, just one sec. If we take a look on the chart on the right here, we have it broken down by supervisorial district. So we see again, district number 5 is the largest producer of fiscal impacts from LACERA pensioners at 83 million, followed by district 1 at 71, and then district 4 at 68. And district 3, while the largest, again, while it has the smallest concentration of LACERA pensioners, it's only 2 million shy away from district 2 as a result of its significant economic activity. Next slide. So I want to shift it now just to talk a little bit more about the demographics and the portfolio of LACERA pensioners, starting with the age group. We did a little bit of analysis and we found, unsurprisingly, overwhelmingly, most of the LACERA pensioners are age 65 and over, roughly 82%, or about 34,000 of the 42,000 pensioners residing in Los Angeles County. What's real interesting is when we dove into the ethnic and racial composition for LACERA pensioners, and we compared that to LA County. And what we found was the portfolio for LACERA pensioners is quite diverse when compared to the county averages. If we look at the county averages between Hispanic and white individuals, roughly that constitutes roughly 80% of the total population. But amongst the LACERA group, LACERA pensioners, it's pretty evenly distributed across the 4 represented racial and ethnic individuals. all the groups hover between 20 and 30%, and there's no one overwhelming majority, showing a pretty good, a strong diversity and inclusion here. Next slide, please. And I want to talk a little bit here about one of the social impact variables that we discussed. A lot of times volunteering doesn't really get a lot of mention in terms of economics and the benefit that it provides to the economy, but really a lot of this is actual work, whether it's services or producing goods, that is actually super beneficial to the economy. And a lot of it normally goes unpaid and is free. As we can see, usually people who are working are too busy to go volunteer, with hours usually going 55 and below for ages 64 and under. But for individuals who are retired, aka those 65 and older, we see almost 94 hours of volunteering annually that's helping causes and organizations in their local community. And that's exactly what a lot of the LACERA pensioners are doing as well. So there's a massive social benefit to providing pensioners a constant stream of revenue where they don't have to worry about the finances, and they can have a helping hand in their local communities as well. Slide. Thank you. So to kind of summarize, I do want to just go over a lot of the social impacts that we kind of highlighted. So first and foremost, I want to highlight the importance of a defined benefit pension. Consistent fixed monthly income is extremely valuable for an economy, because despite the economic condition, whether it's in a boom or it's in a downturn, it gives the household a little bit more comfort to spend consistently as they do, and it helps support vulnerable industries, as we discussed with, for example, with leisure and hospitality. It's, as we just discussed, also individuals who are retired have more time on their hand to pursue activities that they want to, and that includes volunteering, which is a form of work when we think about it, and that provides a significant benefit to the local communities in which the pensioners reside in. Next is the diversity in LACERA, which we discussed as well. LACERA's pensioners are highly diverse, especially when we compare it to the makeup of the Los Angeles County economy, where it's pretty equally distributed in terms of the racial and ethnic background of the LACERA pensioners in LA County. And then lastly, just to reiterate, pensioners are of growing importance to the economy overall. When we're saying 1 in 4 people are estimated to be age 65 and over by 2050, that means the economy is going to be heavily reliant on the spending of those individuals. You know, the United States economy is a consumer-based spending. So shifts in demographics mean we need to constantly understand where these shifts shifts in spending are coming from by age groups. And that's why it's highly valuable to conduct analyses to understand the mechanisms in which pensioners such as LACERA pensioners are benefiting industries in both locally and at a more broad level throughout the state. That's it from our end. Take any questions.